They thought I was just another suspect. They thought my uniform was a costume. They were dead wrong. When Officer Brad Thompson slapped handcuffs on me, a highly decorated Marine Sergeant Major, at that dusty roadside gas station, he didn't just break protocol. He declared war on the wrong man. What started as a routine stop spiraled into a national standoff, dragging the Pentagon into a small-town precinct and exposing corruption so deep it would rot the badge right off a sheriff's chest. This wasn't just an arrest, it was a reckoning. And for that officer, the sentence wouldn't be a slap on the wrist. It would be 62 years of hard time. Buckle up. The heat in rural Floyd County, Georgia, didn't just sit on you, it pushed you down. It was a humid, suffocating blanket that made the asphalt shimmer and the cicadas scream. I stepped out of my Ford F-150, my polished boots crunching on the gravel of Earl's Gas and Go. I wasn't in my truck for a joyride. I was deep into my drive back to the Marine Corps base in Jacksonville, North Carolina, after burying my father in Mississippi. I was tired. My heart was heavy. But my uniform, Service Alpha's olive green coat, khaki shirt, the chevrons on my sleeves gleaming gold and red, was immaculate. To me, the uniform wasn't just clothing. It was my skin. It was 25 years of deployments to Fallujah, Helmand, and places the government didn't talk about. I adjusted my cover, the white belt perfectly aligned, and walked toward the sliding glass doors. I needed a bottle of water and a pack of gum to keep my eyes open. Inside, the air conditioner rattled like a dying engine. The clerk, a teenager named Tyler with acne scars and a boredom that bordered on comatose, barely looked up from his phone. I grabbed a liter of water from the cooler. I moved with the fluid, dangerous grace of a man who had survived close-quarters combat more times than I cared to count. I placed the water and a pack of spearmint gum on the counter. "Just these, son," I said. My voice was a low rumble, calm and authoritative. Tyler scanned the items. I reached into my pocket for my wallet. As I did, the bell above the door jingled aggressively. The atmosphere in the store shifted instantly. The air grew tighter, heavier. Officer Brad Thompson walked in. Thompson was a Floyd County lifer. He was 35 with a waistline that was starting to fight a losing battle against his duty belt and a haircut that was trying too hard to be high and tight. He had a reputation in the county, not for being a good cop, but for being a loud one. He was the kind of officer who saw every interaction as a challenge to his authority, a nail for his hammer. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes locking onto me. He didn't see the rank. He didn't see the service stripes. He saw a large black man in a uniform that Thompson decided didn't look right. "You," Thompson barked, hooking his thumbs into his vest. "Don't move." I froze, my hand halfway to my wallet. I slowly turned my head, keeping my movements deliberate. "Is there a problem, officer?" I said. "Don't move." Thompson stepped closer, his hand hovering near his holster. "We got a report of a stolen vehicle, F-150, dark blue. My truck was black." "My truck is black, officer," I said, my voice level, "and it's registered to me. My ID is in my wallet, which I was about to reach for." "I don't care what color you think it is," Thompson sneered, stepping into my personal space. The officer smelled of stale coffee and aggression. "And I didn't tell you to reach for nothing. Turn around, hands on the counter." I narrowed my eyes. I had commanded battalions. I had negotiated with tribal warlords. I wasn't going to be bullied by a small-town deputy with an inferiority complex. "Officer, I am Sergeant Major Jamal Stone of the United States Marine Corps. I am active duty. I'm simply buying water." "I don't give a damn if you're the King of England," Thompson snapped. He grabbed my shoulder and shoved me toward the counter. It was a mistake. I didn't stumble. I didn't flinch. I planted my feet, my body like an oak tree rooted in concrete. I slowly looked down at Thompson's hand on my shoulder, then up at his eyes. "Remove your hand," I said. It wasn't a request, it was an order. Thompson's face went red. His ego, fragile and bruised, flared up. "Resisting arrest, is that it? You want to play it that way?" "I am not resisting," I said calmly. "I'm informing you that you are making a mistake, a very expensive mistake." Thompson unclipped his radio. "Dispatch, I got a suspect at Earl's, large male impersonating military personnel." Impersonating. That was the word that would seal Thompson's fate, though he didn't know it yet. Backup arrived quickly. 2 more cruisers screeched into the lot, lights flashing, sirens wailing unnecessarily. Inside, Thompson had his taser drawn, aimed squarely at my chest. I hadn't moved. I stood at the position of attention, my hands clearly visible on the counter, my face a mask of stone. Tyler, the clerk, was cowering behind the cigarette rack. "Get on your knees!" Thompson screamed, spit flying from his lips. "Last warning!" "I will not kneel," I said. "I have done nothing wrong. I will submit to handcuffs if you feel it necessary for your safety. But I will not kneel like a criminal in my uniform." "Get him!" Thompson yelled to the two new deputies who burst through the door. They swarmed me. One grabbed my left arm, the other my right. They kicked my legs apart. They treated a man who had defended their freedom like a dangerous animal. I didn't fight back. I knew the game. If I fought, I died. If I died, the truth died with me. I had to survive to burn them down legally. They slammed me against the counter hard enough to knock the breath out of me. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into my wrists. They were tight. Too tight. "You're making a mistake," I said again, my cheek pressed against the linoleum counter. "Check my ID. It's in my pocket. My military ID." "Shut up." Thompson grabbed me by the collar of my service alphas, violating the uniform, and hauled me up. "You can tell it to the judge. Stolen valor." Thompson marched me out of the store. A small crowd had gathered at the pumps. People were filming with their phones. "Look at this," Thompson shouted to the onlookers, playing to the crowd. "Think you can put on a costume and intimidate honest folks? Not in my county." He shoved me toward the cruiser. My cover, my hat, had fallen off in the scuffle. It lay in the dust. "My cover," I said. "Pick it up." Thompson looked at the white hat on the ground. He kicked it. He actually kicked it under the patrol car. "Get in the car," Thompson hissed. He slammed my head against the roof frame as he shoved me into the back seat. It was a petty amateur move designed to inflict pain and dominance. I sat in the cramped plastic seat, my shoulders aching, my wrists bleeding slightly where the cuffs pinched. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I began to memorize the officers' names and details. I wasn't a prisoner. I was an intelligence operative behind enemy lines. Thompson jumped in the front seat, laughing with his partner. "Did you see the look on his face? Impersonating a sergeant major. That's a federal crime, man. We're going to nail this guy to the wall." "He looked pretty legit, Brad," the partner said, sounding unsure. "That haircut, the ribbons looked real." "You can buy all that crap on eBay," Thompson scoffed. "He's just some drifter trying to get free drinks. I ran the plate on the truck. It came back to a Jamal Black, but the system's slow today. Probably stolen ID, too." They drove to the Floyd County Sheriff's Department. The ride was bumpy. The air conditioning in the back was non-existent. I sat in the heat, sweating into my wool coat. But I didn't complain. I just waited. When we arrived at the station, they paraded me through the booking area. Sheriff Hank Caldwell was drinking coffee in his office with the door open. He looked up, saw Thompson dragging a sergeant major in handcuffs, and frowned. But he didn't stop it. He trusted his men and didn't want the paperwork of questioning them. They took me to the processing room. They took my belt. They took my shoelaces. They took my wallet. Thompson opened the wallet and dumped the contents on the table. A driver's license, a credit card, and my CAC card, the Common Access Card, the standard ID for active duty military. Thompson picked it up. He looked at the chip. He looked at the hologram. "Good fake," he muttered, tossing it back down. "Really good fake." "Call the base," I said from the holding cell bench. "Call my base in Jacksonville." "I ain't calling nobody," Thompson said. "You get one phone call when we process you. Until then, you sit there and think about your little costume party." Thompson slammed the cell door shut. The clang echoed through the concrete room. I sat on the metal bench. I looked at the bars. I looked at the camera in the corner of the ceiling. "You have no idea," I whispered to the empty room. "You have absolutely no idea who you just arrested." Time passed as I sat in a meditative state. I had been trained to endure waiting. I had waited in ambush pits for days. A jail cell in Georgia was a luxury hotel compared to a foxhole in the Korengal Valley, but my mind was working furiously. I needed to get word out. Finally, a different deputy came to the cell. It was a young woman, Deputy Nicole Jenkins. She looked nervous. "Water?" she asked, holding a paper cup through the bars. I stood up and took it. "Thank you, Deputy." She looked at my uniform. She looked at the ribbons. She had a brother in the Army. She knew what those ribbons meant. She saw the Purple Heart. She saw the bronze star with a V device for valor. "Is that real?" she whispered. "It is," I said, "and Officer Thompson has made a grave error. I need my phone call." Thompson said you're a fraud, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Deputy Jenkins, I said, reading her name tag. If I am a fraud, then a phone call won't hurt, will it? But if I am not, and you deny me my rights, you become an accessory to a federal civil rights violation. She swallowed hard. She looked down the hallway. Thompson was out on patrol again. The sheriff was gone for the day. 5 minutes, she said. Don't make me regret this. She unlocked the cell and led me to the wall phone. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call my family. I dialed a number I had memorized years ago, a direct line to the Pentagon. Specifically, the office of General Robert Bulldog Vance, a man who had been my captain when we were both young men in the First Gulf War. They were more than colleagues. They were blood brothers. The phone rang 3 times. General Vance's office, Lieutenant Cohen speaking. My voice was crisp. This is Sergeant Major Jamal Stone. I need to speak to the General. Code red. Authorization Alpha 90. The line went silent for a second. That code wasn't used for parking tickets. Hold one, Sergeant Major. A gruff voice that sounded like gravel in a blender came on the line. Stone, I thought you were on leave. What the hell's going on? General, I said, I am currently incarcerated in the Floyd County Jail, Georgia. I have been arrested by Officer Brad Thompson. The charges are resisting arrest and impersonating a military officer. I have been assaulted. My uniform has been desecrated. I'm being held without valid cause. There was a silence on the other end, a silence that was terrifyingly loud. Did you say impersonating? General Vance asked, his voice dropping an octave. Yes, sir. They believe my ID is fake. They kicked my cover under a car, sir. They kicked your cover? Yes, sir. Are you safe right now, Stone? I am in a cell, unarmed, compliant. Stay put, Vance growled. Don't say another word to them. Don't sign anything. I'm making a call. Who are you calling, sir? Everyone, Vance said. I'm calling everyone. The line clicked dead. I hung up the phone and turned to Deputy Nicole Jenkins. She was staring at me, her face pale. Who was that? She asked. That, I said, walking back into my cell and sitting down, was the cavalry. What happened next at the Pentagon was that General Vance slammed the phone down so hard the plastic cracked. He didn't sit down. He walked out of his office into the bullpen where a dozen aides were working. Listen up, he roared. The room went dead silent. I want the Judge Advocate General on the line. I want the FBI liaison and get me the governor of Georgia now. Sir, a major asked, confused. What is the situation? The situation is that some hick deputy just arrested the most decorated enlisted Marine in my command, and I'm going to bring the wrath of God down on Floyd County. He pointed to the map on the wall. Get a bird ready. I'm going to Georgia. The ripple had started. What Thompson thought was a pebble thrown in a pond was actually a depth charge, and the explosion was just beginning. The atmosphere in the Floyd County Sheriff's Department shifted like a tornado. Sheriff Hank Caldwell was sitting at his desk staring at a budget report when his private line rang. Not the dispatch line, the red phone, the one only the county commissioner and the governor had. He picked it up, expecting a complaint about road repairs. Caldwell, he grunted. Sheriff! The voice on the other end was icy, precise, and terrified. It was the governor's chief of staff. Do you have a prisoner in your custody by the name of Jamal Black? Caldwell frowned, leaning back in his creaky leather chair. Name sounds familiar. My boys brought in a guy for impersonating a soldier a couple of hours ago. Why? Sheriff, the chief of staff whispered. I need you to listen to me very carefully. You need to go downstairs right now, and you need to unarrest that man. You need to offer him coffee. You need to polish his shoes if he asks you to. What? Why? Who is he? The governor just got a call from the Pentagon, and then another one from the FBI and another one from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. That impersonator you have, he's a sergeant major with top-level clearance. He's a war hero, Caldwell, and apparently your deputy assaulted him. Caldwell felt the blood drain from his face. Thompson said he was resisting, said the ID was a fake. Thompson is an idiot, the chief of staff snapped. Fix this now before the feds turn your station into a parking lot. The line clicked dead. Caldwell dropped the phone. He stood up, his knees popping, and grabbed his hat. He stormed out of the office and into the bullpen. Thompson, he bellowed. Officer Thompson was sitting at his desk, feet up, laughing at a YouTube video on his phone. He looked up, a half-eaten donut in his hand. Yeah, boss? Where's the prisoner? Caldwell demanded, marching over. The Marine? The fake Marine? Thompson smirked. He's in holding, cooling his heels, probably going to cry for a lawyer soon. Get him out, Caldwell hissed. Now! Thompson blinked. Boss, you serious? I got him dead to rights, stolen valor, resisting. Shut your mouth, Caldwell roared, silencing the entire room. His ID is real. He's a sergeant major. Do you know what kind of storm is coming our way? Thompson's smirk faltered, but his ego wouldn't let him fold. Boss, the system was slow. The ID looked fake. I acted on probable cause. If he's real, that's on him for acting suspicious. Acting suspicious? Caldwell grabbed Thompson by his vest. He was buying water. Go get the keys. But it was too late. Outside, the sound of engines, big, heavy engines, drowned out the cicadas. The station's front windows vibrated. Deputy Nicole Jenkins, who was standing by the window, gasped. Sheriff, you better look at this. Caldwell walked to the window. His heart stopped. Pulling into the gravel lot wasn't just a car. It was a convoy. 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans with government plates flanked by 2 military police cruisers from the nearest base. And behind them, a news van from the state capitol was already setting up a satellite dish. Oh God, Caldwell whispered. The doors of the lead Suburban opened. 4 men stepped out. They were wearing suits that cost more than Caldwell made in a year. In the center was General Robert Bulldog Vance, commanding the operation. He was in his dress uniform, a wall of medals on his chest, his face set in a grimace of pure destruction. Behind him were 2 MPs, heavily armed, looking less like police and more like soldiers ready to clear a house. They didn't knock. The front doors of the sheriff's station burst open. The receptionist, a sweet old lady named Martha, dropped her knitting. General Vance marched to the center of the room. He didn't look at the deputies. He didn't look at the receptionist. He looked straight at Sheriff Caldwell. I am General Robert Vance, he announced, his voice booming off the cinder block walls. I am here for Sergeant Major Jamal Stone, and I am here to facilitate a federal investigation into the kidnapping of a United States Marine. Kidnapping. The word hung in the air like toxic smoke. Now, Vance said, stepping closer to Caldwell until they were nose to nose. Where is my Marine? Thompson foolishly decided to speak up. He stood up from his desk, puffing out his chest. Now, wait a minute. You can't just waltz in here. This is Floyd County jurisdiction. I arrested that man for... General Vance slowly turned his head. He looked at Thompson with the kind of look a lion gives a limping gazelle. You, Vance said quietly. Officer Thompson, I presume. Yeah, that's me, Thompson said, though his voice wavered. Thompson, Vance said. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it immediately. Vance motioned to the MPs. Secure the perimeter. No one leaves. No one touches a file. No one deletes a video. If a paperclip moves, I want to know about it. He turned back to Caldwell. Take me to him. Caldwell, sweating profusely, fumbled for his keys. Right this way, General. They marched back to the holding cells. Caldwell unlocked the heavy steel door. I was sitting on the bench exactly where they had left me. I looked up, saw the general, and stood to attention. Despite the rumpled uniform, despite the lack of a cover, despite the exhaustion, I looked every inch the warrior. General, I said, saluting crisply. General Vance returned the salute, holding it for a long second. Then he dropped his hand and stepped into the cell. He didn't hug me. That wasn't our way. He simply gripped my shoulder. At ease, Stone, Vance said softly. We're leaving. Not yet, sir, I said. I didn't move toward the open door. The general raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. I can't leave yet, sir, I said, my voice hard. They took my cover. Officer Thompson kicked it under his patrol car, and they took my phone and my wallet. I looked at the sheriff. I want my property returned, and I want Officer Thompson to return it personally. The general smiled. It was a terrifying smile. He turned to Sheriff Caldwell. You heard the sergeant major. Get Thompson in here. The power dynamic had completely inverted. The hunter was now the prey. Officer Thompson was shoved into the holding cell area by his own sheriff. He looked small now, stripped of his bravado. The presence of the federal agents and the grim-faced MPS had finally pierced his skull. He realized this wasn't going to blow over. My hat, Thompson stammered. Cover, I corrected him, my voice cutting like a razor. It is called a cover. Thompson swallowed. It's outside under the car. Go get it, General Vance ordered. Thompson looked at Caldwell for help, but the sheriff looked away. Thompson turned and walked out, humiliated. He had to crawl on his hands and knees in the dusty parking lot in front of the news crews that were now filming live to retrieve the white hat from under the dirty chassis of his cruiser. He came back in, dusting it off, his face burning red. He handed it to me. I inspected it. There was a grease smudge on the white vinyl. "It's ruined," I said calmly, "but I will take it as evidence." I placed the cover gently on the bench. Then I turned my eyes to Thompson. "Now," I said, "let's talk about the dash cam." Thompson froze. "The camera was off, malfunction. I wrote it in the report." Is that so?" General Vance interjected. He signaled to one of the men in suits, an FBI forensic technician. "Agent Miller, did you check the cruiser?" "Yes, General," the agent said, holding up a hard drive. "The system was manually disabled, but these new units have a fail-safe buffer. It records the time prior to the manual shutoff. We have everything." Thompson's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the bars of the cell for support, and the agent continued, looking at a tablet. "We found something else interesting in the trunk of Officer Thompson's cruiser. A secondary lockbox, not department issue." Thompson went pale. "That's personal property. You need a warrant." "We have a federal warrant signed by a U.S. district judge 10 minutes ago," Vance said. "Open it." The agent placed the box on the table and popped the latch. Inside there were stacks of cash, rubber-banded rolls of 20s and 50s, and underneath the cash a collection of driver's licenses and credit cards. I walked over and looked at the box. I picked up a license. It belonged to a man named Jamal Williams. Another belonged to a Hispanic woman named Maria Gonzalez. "Trophies," I whispered. I looked at Thompson. The realization hit the room like a physical blow. "You didn't just stop me because you thought I was a fake," I said, putting the pieces together. "You stopped me because I was driving a nice truck. You target people passing through, people you think won't fight back. You arrest them, seize their assets under civil forfeiture, and then what? You keep a cut." Thompson stayed silent, breathing heavy, panic in his eyes. "It's called the Floyd County Shake," Deputy Nicole Jenkins spoke up from the doorway. She was crying. "Everyone knows he does it, but no one says anything because he's the sheriff's nephew." The room went silent. Sheriff Caldwell closed his eyes, defeated. "His nephew?" General Vance turned to Caldwell. "Is this true?" "By marriage," Caldwell whispered. "I told him to cut it out. I didn't know he was keeping the IDs." "You told him to cut it out?" Vance laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Sheriff, you are relieved of command. You're under arrest for conspiracy and obstruction of justice." The MPs moved in. They handcuffed the sheriff. Then they turned to Thompson. "Officer Thompson," the FBI agent said, "we are adding charges: racketeering, grand larceny, federal civil rights violations, and kidnapping." Thompson looked at me. For the first time, there was no sneer, only fear. "I was just doing my job," Thompson whimpered. He resisted. "I never resisted," I said, stepping out of the cell. A free man, I endured. I walked past Thompson, stopping just inches from his face. "You wanted to teach me a lesson about authority," I said. "You wanted to show me who owns this county. Well, officer, you're about to learn who owns the United States government." I walked out of the holding area into the lobby. The station was swarming with agents. They were seizing computers. They were boxing up files. General Vance walked out beside me. "You okay, Stone?" "I'm fine, sir," I said, "but I want to make sure of one thing." "Name it." "I want to be there at the sentencing. I want to look him in the eye when the gavel comes down." "Oh, you'll be there," Vance promised. "We're going to make this the most public trial in the history of Georgia." The trial of the United States versus Brad Thompson did not take place in the humid, familiar confines of the Floyd County Courthouse. The corruption uncovered by the FBI was so systemic, so rot-filled, that the Department of Justice successfully petitioned for a change of venue. The proceedings were moved north to the U.S. District Courthouse in Atlanta, a monolith of limestone and steel that signaled the end of small-town protections. By the time the trial began, the Floyd County Shake had become national terminology for rural police corruption. The investigation had revealed a sprawling racketeering enterprise. The sheriff's department, a local towing company, and a complicit district judge had conspired to seize millions in assets from out-of-state drivers over 5 years. But Brad Thompson was the face of the operation. He was the enforcer. On the morning of opening statements, the atmosphere outside the courthouse was electric. News trucks from every major network lined the street. But inside the gallery was a sea of solemnity. The entire left side of the courtroom was occupied by a sea of blue. 50 active duty and retired Marines, all wearing their dress blues, sat in perfect silence. They didn't speak. They didn't protest. They simply watched. Among them in the front row sat me, Sergeant Major Jamal Stone. I wore my service alphas, my cover resting on my knee, my posture as rigid as a statue. Thompson sat at the defense table, flanked by attorney Victor Klein, a high-priced defense attorney provided by the Fraternal Order of Police. Thompson looked different, thinner, paler. The swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous tic in his jaw. He kept glancing back at the Marines, shrinking slightly every time he made eye contact with one of them. The defense's gamble was bold, if desperate. Klein's opening strategy tried to paint Thompson not as a corrupt cop, but as a victim of the times, a zealous guardian who made an honest mistake in a high-pressure environment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Klein boomed, pacing in front of the jury box. Officer Thompson saw a truck that didn't match the profile. He saw an ID that the system flagged as slow. He saw a man who fit the description of a threat. Was he aggressive? Yes. Police work is ugly, but being wrong is not a federal crime. Being mistaken is not kidnapping. Officer Thompson was trying to protect the integrity of the military uniform from what he truly believed was an imposter. It was a good narrative. For a moment, looking at the jury, mostly suburbanites who respected law enforcement, it seemed like it might work. Then, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Vance, the niece of General Vance, a poetic twist of fate, stood up. She didn't pace, she didn't shout. She simply walked to the podium and arranged her papers. "The defense wants you to believe this was a mistake," Vance said, her voice cutting through the room like a cold wind. "We will prove it was a hunt. We will prove that Officer Thompson didn't care about the uniform. He didn't care about the law. He cared about the black Ford F-150 and the cash he hoped to find inside it. Sergeant Major Stone wasn't a suspect. He was prey." The turning point of the first week was the dash cam footage. When the lights dimmed, the courtroom went deathly silent. On the massive projection screen, the jury watched the encounter unfold in high definition. They saw Thompson's aggression. They heard the tone of his voice dripping with condescension. But the audio enhancement processed by FBI audio engineers was the nail in the coffin. Before the stop, as Thompson's cruiser sat idling, the jury heard him murmuring to himself. The subtitles provided by the forensic team left no doubt. Big truck, out of state, easy pickings. Then came the physical confrontation. The jury watched Thompson kick the white cover under the chassis of the car. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. In the front row, I didn't flinch. I watched the screen, watching my own humiliation replay, my face a mask of stone. Then came the racial slurs. The buffer recording had captured Thompson ranting to his partner after shoving me into the back seat. The words were vile, hate-filled, and undeniable. Thompson sank low in his chair, covering his face with his hand. The jury looked from the screen to the defendant, their expressions hardening from curiosity to disgust. The reluctant witness. Klein, the defense attorney, tried to salvage the case on cross-examination. He argued that the slurs were heat of the moment, frustration, and that the kick was accidental. He was fighting for an acquittal on the kidnapping charge, hoping for a lesser sentence on simple assault. But the prosecution had one final card to play, a witness that Thompson never expected to see. "The government calls Tyler Reynolds to the stand," Prosecutor Vance announced. The doors opened and Tyler, the gas station clerk, walked in. He looked terrified. He was 20 years old, wearing a suit that was 2 sizes too big, wringing his hands. He wouldn't look at Thompson. Thompson whispered frantically to his lawyer, "He's a nobody. He was inside. He didn't hear anything." Tyler took the oath, his voice trembling. "Mr. Reynolds," Vance began gently, "where were you on the afternoon in question?" "I was behind the counter at Earl's Gas and Go," Tyler whispered. "And did you see Officer Thompson prior to Sergeant Major Stone arriving?" "Yes, ma'am. He was there for a while. He was parked around the side near the air pump. He came in to use the restroom and buy a Monster energy drink." "Did he speak to you?" "Yes." "What did he say?" Tyler swallowed hard. He looked at the jury, then briefly at Thompson, who was glaring at him with pure venom. Tyler quickly looked away. He was looking out the window. He saw the sergeant major's truck pull in. It was shiny, brand new, and Officer Thompson laughed. He laughed? Vance pressed. And what did he say exactly? He said, "Looks like payday. That truck's got out-of-state plates. I bet I can find a reason to take it." The courtroom erupted. Judge Harlan Whitaker had to bang his gavel 3 times to restore order. "Objection! Hearsay!" Klein screamed, leaping to his feet. "Overruled!" Judge Whitaker snapped. "It falls under the exception of a statement against interest. The witness will continue." Vance leaned in. "Did he mention anything about the driver's uniform or the driver looking suspicious?" "No, ma'am," Tyler said, shaking his head. He hadn't even seen the driver yet. The sergeant major was still in the truck. Officer Thompson decided to arrest him before he even saw his face. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the smoking gun. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't about a fake ID. It was premeditated highway robbery. Thompson had targeted the vehicle for seizure before he knew who was driving. The uniform was just an obstacle he thought he could bully his way through. Thompson's defense crumbled in that instant. Klein slumped back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He knew it was over. The verdict. The jury deliberated for a short time. Thompson stood, his legs shaking so badly he had to lean on the table. We, the jury, the foreperson, a retired librarian, read with a steady voice. Find the defendant, Brad Thompson, on count 1, deprivation of rights under color of law, guilty. Count 2, kidnapping, guilty. Count 3, racketeering, guilty. Count 4, falsifying federal records, guilty. And on it went. 24 counts, 24 guilty verdicts. Thompson looked like he had been punched in the gut. He looked back at the gallery, searching for sympathy, but found only the cold, hard stares of 50 Marines. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Whitaker convened the court. The federal guidelines were harsh, but Whitaker had discretion to run sentences consecutively rather than concurrently due to the egregious nature of the crime. Thompson was given a chance to speak. He stood up, weeping. "I'm sorry," he blubbered. I got caught up. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I have a daughter. Please, Judge, have mercy." Judge Whitaker looked down over his spectacles. He was a man known for his fairness, but today his face was thunderous. "Mr. Thompson," the judge began, his voice filling the room, "you ask for mercy, but the court recalls the dash cam footage. Did you show mercy when you slammed a war hero's head against a car door? Did you show mercy when you kicked his cover into the dirt? Did you show mercy when you ignored his valid military identification?" The judge paused, letting the questions hang in the air. "You were entrusted with a badge, a symbol of safety. Instead, you used it as a weapon to hunt the innocent. You targeted Sergeant Major Stone, not because he was a criminal, but because you wanted his property. You are a predator who hid behind the law." Whitaker picked up his gavel. "For the charge of kidnapping, 25 years. For racketeering, 20 years. For civil rights violations, 10 years. For assault with a deadly weapon, 7 years. These sentences are to run consecutively. You are sentenced to a total of 62 years in a federal penitentiary. You will not be eligible for parole for at least 52 years. 62 years, a wail broke from Thompson's throat, a primal, terrified sound. "My life. You're taking my life." "You took your own life the moment you betrayed your oath," Judge Whitaker said coldly. "Marshal, remand the defendant." Marshals moved in, grabbing Thompson by the arms. He struggled, his legs giving out, sobbing uncontrollably. No, I was just doing my job," he screamed as they dragged him toward the side door. As he was hauled past the bar, his eyes locked with the front row. I stood up. I didn't smile. I didn't pump my fist. I simply placed my pristine white cover on my head, adjusted the brim until it was perfectly parallel, and gave Thompson a single slow nod. It wasn't a nod of forgiveness, it was a confirmation, target neutralized. Thompson was dragged through the door, his screams echoing in the hallway until the heavy steel door slammed shut, cutting off the sound and sealing his fate forever. The courtroom remained silent for a long moment. Then General Vance, sitting beside me, leaned over. "Justice?" the general asked. I smoothed my uniform coat. "Accountability, General. Now let's go home." The irony for the man who arrested me was that the prison transport bus offered a view of the world he was leaving behind, framed by steel mesh that chopped the scenery into tiny, unreachable diamonds. For Brad Thompson, the view was the highway heading west toward the United States Penitentiary, in Atlanta, Georgia. He was no longer Officer Thompson. He was inmate number whatever. He sat, shackled to a bench, wearing an orange jumpsuit that smelled of industrial detergent and other men's sweat. The fabric was rough against his skin, a constant irritant. Beside him sat a man with face tattoos who had been staring at Thompson's neck for hours without blinking. Thompson tried to lean on his training, project dominance, maintain situational awareness, but he had no weapon, no badge, and no backup. He was a sheep in a pen of wolves, and the wolves knew exactly what he used to be. The news of his trial had traveled faster than the bus. In the federal system, there are TVS, there are newspapers, and there is the telegraph, the word of mouth that moves from facility to facility. The story of the crooked cop who humiliated a Marine sergeant major had gone viral. It wasn't just a news story, it was a legend. And in prison, legends have consequences. The intake was a mirror of cruelty. Upon arrival at the penitentiary, Thompson was ushered into the intake processing unit. It was a cold, sterile room that smelled of bleach. "Strip," the guard barked. Thompson looked at the guard. "I used to be on the job," Thompson mumbled, fumbling with his zipper. "Can we, professional courtesy?" The guard looked at him with dead eyes. "You're not on the job, inmate. You're property of the Bureau of Prisons. Strip, squat, cough." The humiliation was absolute. Thompson stood naked, shivering on the cold tile while another man inspected him. It was the exact power dynamic he had inflicted on me, but magnified 1,000 times. He felt small. He felt violated. Karma wasn't just knocking, it was kicking the door down. Thompson was placed in the special housing unit for the first 2 weeks, a standard procedure for former law enforcement to assess safety risks. But Thompson, desperate for social interaction and arrogant enough to believe he could handle himself, petitioned the warden to be moved to the general population. "I can handle it," Thompson told the case manager. "I know how to talk to people." It was the last mistake he would make as a free-thinking man. He was released into the unit. The noise hit him first, a cacophony of shouting, slamming dominoes, and the blare of televisions. He walked to his assigned cell, keeping his head down. He hadn't been there an hour when a shadow fell across his bunk. Thompson looked up. Standing in the doorway was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair buzzing close to his scalp and arms thick with muscle. On his forearm was a faded tattoo, Semper Fi. This was Gunny Ellis. He was doing life for a botched bank robbery committed 20 years ago during a PTSD episode. He was the unspoken leader of the veterans group in the unit, a collection of former soldiers, Marines, and sailors who looked out for each other. "You're the guy," Gunny said. His voice wasn't loud. It was a low rumble like a tank idling. Thompson sat up, forcing a smile. "I don't know who you think—" "Don't lie to me," Gunny cut him off. "We watched the trial on CNN in the rec room. You're the one who kicked the sergeant major's cover." Thompson's throat went dry. "Look, it was a misunderstanding. I have respect for the service. You have respect?" Gunny stepped into the cell. The air seemed to leave the room. "You took a man who survived Fallujah, and you treated him like trash so you could steal his truck. You dishonored the uniform." Gunny leaned in close. "In here, we don't care about the badge you wore. We care about the code you broke. You're not a cop anymore, Thompson. You're just a man with no honor, and it's going to be a very, very long 62 years. Gunny didn't hit him. He didn't have to. He simply turned and walked away, but the green light had been lit. Thompson found himself ostracized. When he went to the chow hall, his tray was knocked over. When he went to the showers, the hot water was mysteriously turned off. When he tried to use the phone, the line went dead. He wasn't physically beaten within an inch of his life. That would have been too easy, too quick. Instead, he was subjected to psychological warfare. The veterans in the prison ensured that Thompson never had a moment of peace. They would march past his cell in formation during count time, staring him down. They called him Stolen Valor instead of his name. Thompson wrote letters to the warden, begging for transfer. They were denied. He was in the hell he had built for himself. While Thompson rotted in a concrete box, the world outside was changing because of him. The settlement from Floyd County was massive, $5 million in damages. But I didn't buy a yacht. I used the money to establish the Stone Vance Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit dedicated to providing top-tier legal representation to veterans and active duty service members who were targeted by civil forfeiture laws. But I went further. I testified before Congress. Dressed in my service alphas, I stood before the Senate Judiciary Committee and told my story. This is not about one bad apple, I told the senators, my voice televised to millions. This is about a system that incentivizes officers to become highway robbers. If a badge can be used as a license to steal, then the badge is tarnished. My testimony led to the passing of the Jamal Stone Act, a federal law that strictly prohibited local law enforcement from seizing assets without a criminal conviction and mandated body camera usage for all interactions involving military personnel. It was a landmark victory. I had turned my trauma into a shield for others. Years into his sentence, Thompson was a broken man. He had lost weight. His hair had fallen out from stress. He spent his days sweeping the library, his eyes darting around, terrified of his own shadow. One rainy Tuesday, he was called to the visitation room. Thompson was confused. His wife had divorced him years ago. His parents had stopped visiting. He had no one. He shuffled into the room, shackles clinking on the floor. He sat down at the glass partition and picked up the phone. On the other side of the glass sat me. I was in civilian clothes, a sharp navy suit. I looked healthy, strong, and at peace. Thompson stared at me, his mouth agape. "Why are you here? You come to gloat?" "No," I said calmly. "I don't need to gloat. The universe handled that." "Then why?" Thompson's voice cracked. "I came to tell you that I forgive you," I said. Thompson blinked, stunned. "What?" "I forgive you," I repeated. "Not for you, but for me. Holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other man to die. You are in a cage, Brad. I refuse to be in one with you." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a photo. I pressed it against the glass. It was a picture of a young Marine graduating from boot camp. "This is my son," I said. "He just graduated Paris Island. He's driving my old truck now, the black F-150. My eyes bore into Thompson's. I'm teaching him how to be a good Marine, and because of what happened to me, the world he is driving into is a little bit safer. You served a purpose, Brad. You were the example of everything we shouldn't be, and for that, I thank you." I hung up the phone. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked away. Thompson sat there, the phone dangling in his hand. The forgiveness hurt more than the hatred. Hatred he could understand. Hatred was a fight. Forgiveness was a dismissal. It meant he was no longer a threat. He was irrelevant. As the guards came to take him back to his cell, Thompson looked at the gray walls that would be his home until he was an old man. He realized then that the prison wasn't the building. The prison was the memory of the mistake he could never undo. He had tried to arrest a soldier, but he had ended up arresting himself. Brad Thompson thought he held all the power. He thought the badge made him a king, and the uniform made me a target. But he forgot the most important lesson of authority. It is a loan, not a gift. When you abuse it, the debt comes due with interest. I didn't just survive. I revolutionized the system, turning a moment of injustice into a lifetime of protection for others. Thompson served 62 years, not just for what he did, but for the arrogance of believing he was above the law. In the end, the karma wasn't just in the prison sentence. It was in the fact that the man he tried to destroy became a hero while he became a cautionary tale. They thought the badge gave him power over everything, over truth, over honor, over a man who'd bled for this country. But when Officer Brad Thompson decided my uniform was a fake, when he kicked my cover into the dirt and slammed my head against the cruiser roof, he wasn't just arresting me. He was signing his own sentence. 62 years, a lifetime behind bars for a moment of arrogance, greed, and blind prejudice. I sat in that cell, wrists bleeding from too tight cuffs, and I didn't break. I remembered every deployment, every brother I'd lost, every sunrise I'd seen after thinking it would be my last. I endured because I knew the truth always finds its way out, and when it did, it came like thunder. Pentagon generals, FBI agents, news cameras, and a courtroom full of Marines in dress blues staring him down until he shrank into nothing. The real lesson isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when you forget that authority is loaned, not owned. One bad choice, one abuse of power, and the whole house of cards collapses. Thompson thought he could play God in a small Georgia county. Instead, he became a cautionary tale whispered in prisons and boardrooms alike. I forgave him, not to let him off the hook, but to free myself. Hate is a chain you put on your own wrist. Forgiveness doesn't erase the scars, it just stops them from bleeding forever. Life will test you, people will wrong you. Badges, titles, uniforms, they don't make someone right. Character does. Stand tall in your truth, protect your dignity, and trust that justice, slow as it sometimes moves, still moves. I turned pain into purpose with the Jamal Stone Act, shielding others so no one else has to endure what I did. You can do the same with whatever injustice life throws at you. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment where someone tried to strip away your worth, and you rose anyway? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one. If this hit you in the chest, smash that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and hit subscribe with notifications on. More stories of real accountability, real heart, and real justice are coming. You don't want to miss them.